There's a thing that happens when you're out driving in fog, not the poetic kind, the real kind. Your headlights don't help. In fact, they make it worse. All that brightness bouncing back into your eyes, and you're just guessing at the road ahead, hoping you don't hit something that's been there all along. That's what my marriage felt like in the weeks leading up to that night. My name's Benton. I know, not a name you hear every day. My dad was big into Civil War history, and I guess I paid the price. I'm 41. I design circuit boards for a living. I'm not flashy, not particularly charming, but I'm loyal, I'm gentle, and up until 2 Fridays ago, I was madly in love with my wife, Ellery. Ellery was this unpredictable beam of chaos. The kind that walks into a dull room and cracks it open with laughter. People love her. Strangers remember her. She's got this way of making even the mundane feel like a secret adventure. And me? I was always just tagging along. Happy to be there. Happy to be hers. That Friday, she was going to a party for someone she used to work with. Some marketing guy who was finally getting his big break, she said. The invite was last minute, and she debated going at all, said she didn't want to leave me alone on a weekend night. I told her it was fine. We weren't the clingy type. Right before she left, she leaned over the kitchen island and said, "Can you pick me up around 11? I don't want to Uber. It's all the way out in Deerwood." Her lipstick was already on, her earrings in. She looked electric. I nodded. "Text me if it ends earlier." She smiled, and then she was gone. But here's the thing. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't focus. I sat on the couch with the TV on mute and stared at the frozen screen for what felt like hours. Something just felt blurry. Like that fog again. So I left early. Deerwood is about 25 minutes from our place. It's one of those overly landscaped communities that tries to look like it grew out of the ground instead of being plopped there by developers. The party was at a clubhouse by a lake. Quiet. Dimly lit. I parked down the road and walked toward it, planning to just wait in the car, maybe text her that I was outside. But then I heard something strange. Laughter. Not party laughter, hers. Ellery's. Coming from around the side of the building. I moved instinctively, quietly. There was a gravel path that led to a back patio area. I stayed in the shadows, something twisting in my chest like a tight rubber band. And then I saw them. Ellery. And a man I had never seen before. They weren't touching, not yet. But the space between them was intimate. Charged. Like something had either just happened, or was about to. She had that look on her face, the one I used to think was reserved for me. The one she'd flash across a restaurant table when she wanted me to shut up and take her home early. But he wasn't me. She leaned in closer, her hand brushing his arm as she whispered something I couldn't hear. He threw his head back and laughed, not nervously. Like he already knew her. Knew how this would end. I felt sick. And then, he kissed her. Just once. Quick. But there was no hesitation, no surprise. She kissed him back. Not long, but long enough. I backed away like I'd just stumbled into something sacred and rotten. I didn't make a sound. Just walked back to the car with my pulse ringing in my ears. She texted me 20 minutes later. "Hey babe, you can come now, red heart." So I did. I pulled up, smiled, and watched her walk toward me like nothing had happened. She slipped into the passenger seat with a soft sigh and said, "Thanks for being my knight tonight." I just nodded, drove home in silence. She fell asleep 5 minutes in, and I sat there at a red light, somewhere between Deerwood and my own front door, finally realizing the fog wasn't outside anymore. It was in me. She didn't mention the party the next morning. I woke up before her, as usual. Made coffee, let the cat out, scrolled through the news with that same hollow churning in my stomach that I hadn't quite figured out how to name. When Ellery finally shuffled into the kitchen, barefoot in that oversized navy t-shirt I'd bought her in Portland 4 years ago, she greeted me with a yawn and a kiss on the forehead, like nothing had changed. Maybe for her, nothing had. She poured her coffee, added too much sugar the way she always did, and settled into the chair across from me. I watched her stir, sip, stare at her phone. There was no trace of guilt in her face. No hesitancy. Just routine. "So, how was it?" I asked eventually, voice quiet, careful. She glanced up. "The party? It was fine. Not as fun as I expected. I think I'm getting too old for that kind of scene." There was no tremble in her voice. No pause. I studied her for a moment. "See anyone you haven't seen in a while?" She shook her head as she opened her phone again. "No, just the usual crowd. Mostly work people." It was the lie that did it. Not the kiss. Not the man. Not the party. But the clean, casual, utterly practiced way she said it. like she'd rehearsed, like I was the idiot who didn't deserve the truth. And maybe, in her mind, I wasn't. I didn't call her out. Not then. Because part of me, the softest, most broken part, wanted her to fix it without being forced to. I wanted her to choose honesty. I wanted to believe she was better than that kiss I saw. That I was better than just watching it happen. That day passed like a ghost. We went to the farmer's market. She picked out tomatoes and basil and argued playfully with a vendor about peaches. We made pasta that evening and watched reruns of The Office while she curled up against me like she used to, like her body had no idea what my heart had seen. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay there beside her, listening to the sound of her breathing and the occasional shift of fabric as she turned in her sleep. I stared at the ceiling, asking myself the question no one wants to ask. What if I'm not enough anymore? The next day, while she was in the shower, I did something I'd never done before in our marriage. I checked her phone. I hated myself for it. Even as my fingers moved over the screen, I felt this heat of shame crawl up my neck. But I couldn't stop. I needed confirmation. Needed to know if what I saw outside that party was real, or if my mind had twisted it into something worse. There were no messages under Josh or Evan or anything suspicious. But I knew Ellery. She's not sloppy. She's methodical. So I checked her photo gallery. She deleted everything, or thought she had. Hidden inside a deleted folder was a video, less than 10 seconds long. I tapped it. The screen filled with blurry motion, laughing, music. Then Ellery's voice. "Don't make me blush," she said, her words slurred slightly. A low chuckle. A man's voice. "Then don't look at me like that." The screen went black. That was it. 10 seconds. But it told me everything. She didn't delete it by accident. She hid it and forgot to remove it permanently, which meant she wanted to remember it, even if she pretended it didn't exist. I locked the phone, set it down on her side of the bed, and walked to the kitchen in the dark. I stood there, bare feet on cold tile, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. This wasn't some drunken misunderstanding. This wasn't one of those stupid, it didn't mean anything mistakes. This was intentional. It had weight, direction, history. But the worst part? It wasn't even the betrayal. It was realizing I had no idea who my wife was anymore. Sunday morning felt like an impersonation of peace. Sunlight streamed through the blinds like any other weekend. Ellery made pancakes, humming to herself while flipping them on the griddle. The cat purred against my leg like always. But my heart was numb, detached, like someone had pulled the plug from behind my rib cage and forgotten to mention it. I sat at the kitchen table, pretending to read emails, nodding at her when she asked if I wanted syrup, smiling when she told me about a weird dream she had. I could have won an Oscar for that performance. But inside, I was burning with questions I didn't know how to ask without setting the whole world on fire. You ever stare at someone and wonder how they're so good at pretending? That's what I was doing. Watching her joke about the cat knocking over her plant, watching her lick maple syrup from her finger with the same mouth she used to kiss him, and wondering who she was becoming while I stood still. After breakfast, she said she was going to Target. Need a new yoga mat. Mine smells like mildew. I almost laughed. Yoga mat. That's what she thought about. Meanwhile, I was standing waist-deep in an emotional swamp, slowly sinking. When she left, I sat down in the living room and opened my laptop. I don't even know why. Maybe I was searching for an answer I already knew. But something in me needed more. Proof. Evidence. I went back to that deleted video, transferred it to my desktop, and watched it frame by frame. In the background of the video, through a narrow reflection in a window, I caught something. A face. His face. Blurred, but unmistakable, a strong jawline, dark stubble, a smirk that looked too confident to be innocent. And then it hit me. I had seen him before. He worked at her firm. His name was Cyrus. He was introduced to me briefly at her company holiday dinner last year. He shook my hand and called me big guy, like he'd known me forever. Later, Ellery told me he was harmless. He's like a Labrador in a human body, she said. That Labrador kissed my wife outside a party. I opened Facebook and found his profile instantly. Public. Arrogant. Full of gym selfies, rooftop parties, and group shots where he always had a drink in one hand and a woman in the other. Except in the last few weeks, Ellery was in a few of them too, buried in the background. Once sitting at a table with him. Another time clinking glasses, looking up at him mid-laugh. Nothing explicit. Nothing damning. Just enough to tell a story if you knew where to look. I sat there for a long time, staring at her face in those pictures, comparing it to the woman who slept beside me, made pancakes, folded my socks, called me love before bed. Was this an affair? Or was I already the ex and no one had told me? I didn't eat lunch that day. I didn't watch the game like I planned. I didn't even hear her come back into the house. All I remember is her walking up behind me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders and whispering, "I brought you peanut butter M&Ms. Her favorite peace offering. I mumbled something like thanks. She didn't notice how tense I was. Or maybe she did and didn't care. That's what hurt most. The idea that she could stand there, act like everything was normal, and still feel nothing while doing it. That evening, as we curled up on the couch and watched a rerun of some travel show, she nestled under my arm like she always had. And I held her. I held her. The same way I used to when we were 29 and newly married, broke but stupidly in love. My body was acting like everything was fine, but my soul was screaming. You don't know how to confront someone when you're afraid the confrontation will kill whatever's left. That's where I was. At war with myself. One side wanted to shake her by the shoulders and scream, "Why am? When did you stop choosing me?" And the other side, the coward, just wanted to hold on a little longer, even if I had to pretend. That night, while she slept, I sat on the balcony in my old hoodie and stared out into the darkness. Our neighborhood was quiet. Still, no cars, no late-night dogs barking. Just me, and the sound of my breath coming out a little more ragged than I wanted. I knew something had to change, but I didn't know if I was strong enough to start. Monday came like a weight on my chest. Ellery left early for work, earlier than usual. She kissed my cheek while I was still in bed, told me not to forget to take the trash out, and said she might be late because of a meeting. Her voice was even, normal, almost sweet, but her presence lingered in the room like something synthetic. Heavy perfume, the kind she didn't wear for me. I lay there with the blanket pulled halfway up my chest, staring at the ceiling fan. It wasn't spinning, but my thoughts were. I kept turning the same thing over in my head. What kind of man just lets this happen to him? I wasn't violent. I wasn't confrontational. And God help me, I wasn't brave. But I was observant. And now, more than ever, I felt like I was watching my own marriage through the wrong end of a telescope, shrinking, disappearing. I called in sick that day. I needed time, space, silence. By 10 a.m., I had showered, dressed, and was sitting in my car outside Ellery's office building downtown. I told myself I wasn't spying, just looking. It was the kind of excuse only a desperate man believes. I knew I wouldn't be proud of it, but I also knew I'd never forgive myself if I kept waiting for answers that weren't coming. Her building had a small cafe across the street with big windows. I parked there, ordered the weakest latte I've ever tasted, and sat by the glass, staring, watching, waiting. Around 11:05, she came out. Not alone. Cyrus followed 2 steps behind her. Same guy from the photo. Same cocky stride. He wasn't touching her. But there was a tension, a pull between their bodies, like gravity itself was giving them permission. She turned to say something, and he laughed a little too loudly. His hand brushed her back as they crossed the street toward a different building. They didn't see me. She didn't text me until 4 hours later. Work is chaos today. I might be home late. Love you, Blue Heart. Love you. That phrase doesn't mean what it used to. At least not to me. Because love, real love, has temperature. It's warm. It melts things. This felt cold. Like she'd put it on autopilot and hit send from somewhere far away. That evening, I cooked dinner. Pasta. With garlic and a little red pepper, just how she liked it. I even opened a bottle of red. Set the table. Lit a candle. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me was daring her to feel something real again. Or maybe I was clinging to the fantasy that I could somehow pull her back into the orbit of the life we used to share. She walked through the door just after 7, heels in her hand, hair a little wild from the wind. She looked surprised. You cooked? I nodded. Thought we could eat together. She paused, just for a second, then smiled, that trained, camera-ready smile she gave other people. That's really sweet, Ben. Thank you. We ate. She talked about her day like it was scripted. Some client annoyed her. Someone in HR got fired. She laughed about a dumb meme someone shared in the break room. And all the while, I stared at her, wondering how many times someone can lie without flinching. After dinner, we sat on the couch. She curled up beside me and asked if we could watch that awful baking competition show she liked. I agreed. Pretended. Played my part. But all I could think about was that street corner, that man, that touch on her back like he owned a piece of her I never even got to see. She fell asleep 20 minutes into the show, head on my shoulder, breathing soft. I stayed perfectly still, afraid to move, afraid to wake her. Because as strange as it sounds, I needed that moment. That quiet, that pressure of her body on mine. I needed to feel like I was still in something, that I hadn't already been replaced. Later, when I carried her to bed and tucked the blanket around her, she murmured, "You're good to me," before drifting off again. That was the moment I nearly broke. Because I am good to her. I always have been. And now I was finally realizing that sometimes, that just isn't enough. By Thursday, I had stopped hoping she'd confess. Ellery had grown eerily consistent in her rehearsed honesty. She'd mention people she wasn't with, exaggerate tasks that didn't exist, throw in random time buffers like ran late at the gym or needed to stop by Walgreens. I started measuring her lies not in words, but in the gaps between them. 3 seconds between sentence and eye contact? She was hiding something. A shrug instead of a detailed answer? She was covering tracks, smiling with only her mouth, not her eyes. That was the most honest lie she'd told yet. I never thought I'd be the type to go through someone's things. I hate that I became him. But when you feel invisible long enough, you start doing things just to see if you still exist. So I checked her car. Thursday evening, while she was upstairs taking a shower and humming something out of tune, I slipped outside and opened the glove compartment. Receipts, gum wrappers, a bottle of half-used perfume. I opened the center console. A pair of sunglasses I didn't recognize. Men's. A little beat up, with a scratch across the left lens. I stared at them like they were a gun. I didn't take them. I just closed the lid and sat in the driver's seat for a while, gripping the steering wheel like it might hold me together. When Ellery came down later, dressed in sweats, and asking if I wanted to order Thai, I said sure. I even cracked a joke. She laughed and called me silly. We ate noodles on the couch, and I watched her text someone under the table when she thought I wasn't looking. That night, I didn't sleep again. Instead, I opened a blank Google Doc and started typing everything I knew. Every detail, every suspicion. I listed dates, times, words, movements. It felt insane, like I was compiling case notes on someone I still made breakfast for. But I needed it in front of me, needed to see it on the screen, to know it wasn't all in my head. At the bottom of the document, I typed something I hadn't admitted until that moment. If she asks for forgiveness, I don't know if I'll say yes. Friday morning, she left early again. No goodbye kiss this time. Just a shout from the hallway. Meeting at 8. Love you. I didn't respond. I sat in the kitchen with cold coffee and stared at the chair she'd just vacated. It still held the shape of her. It was strange, the way furniture can hold more warmth than a person. Around 10, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. No name. Just a single text. Check the parking lot behind the Whitmore at 1 p.m. Come alone. My first instinct was that it was a scam. Some AI-generated clickbait nonsense. But then I realized something. The Whitmore was the name of the wine bar Ellery used to go to after work with her team. She hadn't mentioned it in months. I waited, paced, debated. Then I grabbed my keys and left. When I arrived, I parked a few spaces away from the back entrance. It was quiet. No music, no movement. Just the sound of a distant truck and my own heartbeat, thudding in my ears like it had taken up a new hobby. At 1:07, a woman knocked on my window. I jumped. She looked familiar. Maybe from Ellery's firm. Blonde, late 30s, sharp eyes like she'd seen too much too young. I rolled the window down. "You're Ben, right?" she asked. I nodded. "I don't have much time," she said. "I shouldn't even be doing this. But you deserve to know." She handed me a flash drive. Just like that. Cold and small in my palm. "Don't watch it at home," she warned. "And don't tell her you got it from me. She'll know, but she can't prove it." I wanted to ask questions, but she was already walking away, glancing over her shoulder like someone might be following her. Within seconds, she disappeared through a service door into the Whitmore building. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes, staring at the flash drive in my hand. That night, after Ellery went to bed and started snoring softly like nothing in the world had ever touched her soul, I crept out of bed and plugged the drive into my laptop. And what I saw on that screen, I'll never forget it. Not the sounds, not the angle, not the laugh she gave, the one she used to save for me, now echoing in a room I didn't recognize, with a man whose face confirmed everything I had feared. Cyrus. It wasn't a video of them together. Not exactly. It was a compilation, pieced together from camera footage, phone videos, Someone had been watching them, or maybe many people had. There were clips of them entering the same hotel, her brushing his hand at lunch, late nights at the same wine bar, an unmistakable moment where she kissed his cheek in the reflection of a tinted window. And then, at the end, a text slide. She's not who you think she is, Ben. But you still have time to be who you are. I shut the laptop and sat in silence, shaking. I wasn't even angry. I was just hollow. And what haunted me most wasn't what I saw. It was the realization that I might still love her anyway. The next morning, I didn't speak a word. Not out of anger. Not even out of fear. I was just numb. Everything inside me had quieted down, like the moment after a crash when even your heartbeat hides. I watched Ellery walk down the stairs wearing the same blue cardigan she always wore on weekends, sipping coffee like it was just another normal Saturday. She sat down at the kitchen table across from me and asked if I wanted to check out the new plant nursery on Wren Hill later. I said maybe. She smiled. I smiled back. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't even a marriage anymore. It was a long, expensive play, and we were both still reading our lines because neither of us had the courage to walk off stage. But I still wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called someone. His name was Carson. We hadn't spoken since my dad's funeral. Old college friend, one of the few people who ever saw me outside the shadow of Ellery. He picked up after 2 rings. Ben, he said. Jesus, man. You okay? I wasn't. But I said, yeah. Just need to get out of town for a couple days. He offered his place upstate without hesitation. Said his family was visiting his in-laws. The house was empty, keys under the pot on the back porch. I told Ellery that I'd gotten a surprise invite to a guy's weekend. Something last minute. No phones, no emails, total disconnect. She didn't protest. Not even a little. Just said, that's probably good for you, and asked if I could pick up some firewood before I left. That was when I knew. She didn't ask questions because she didn't care about the answers anymore. By noon, I was packed and on the road. It wasn't about running. It was about breathing without her perfume poisoning the air. About standing somewhere she hadn't touched. Carson's place was quiet. 2 bedrooms, a small dock, a fridge with nothing but mustard and beer. It was perfect. That night, I sat out by the lake and watched the water move like it had secrets it wouldn't tell. I opened my laptop and rewatched the footage, not because I needed more proof, but because I wanted to erase any part of me that still hoped I was wrong. Then I opened the document I'd been keeping, the list of details, the timeline, the questions I used to pretend I didn't have. And for the first time, I added a new section. What if she isn't evil? What if she's just done loving me? What if I've been building a life for someone who quietly stepped out of it months ago? I closed the laptop and sat in the dark until the cold forced me back inside. The next day, I drove into town to get groceries. I didn't want to bump into anyone, didn't want questions. I wore a hoodie and kept my head down. I bought cereal, coffee, eggs. The woman at the register smiled and said, "You look like someone who hasn't eaten in days." I just laughed quietly and said, "Yeah, something like that." That night, I had a drink, just one, and opened my email. I hadn't planned on it, but something told me I needed to know if she'd written. And there it was. A message from Ellery. Sent that afternoon. Subject line, "We need to talk when you get back." No body. Just that. 7 words that felt like a landmine. I stared at them for a long time, then closed the laptop and sat in the dark again. Same spot. Same chair. But this time, I wasn't just feeling empty. I was starting to feel something sharper. Something that tasted like clarity. And here's what I realized. I wasn't afraid of losing her anymore. I was afraid of what staying with her would turn me into. Because somewhere along the way, I had become the man who knew, and still set the table for her. Still kissed her forehead. Still folded her sweaters and filled up her gas tank. I was still setting the table for a ghost. And I didn't know how many more dinners I could sit through pretending not to notice the seat across from me had already been taken by someone else. I drove back on Sunday evening. The trip upstate hadn't solved anything. There was no lightning bolt of clarity, no grand awakening. Just quiet. Time to hear the echoes in my own head. And for the first time in weeks, they weren't all whispers of doubt. Some were louder, firmer, asking better questions. What do I actually want? Can I ever look at her the same way again? Is this still a marriage, or just the shell of one? The house looked the same as always. Porch light on. Wind chime clanking softly. Her car in the driveway. But as I stood at the front door with my bag slung over my shoulder, I felt like I was visiting a place I hadn't lived in for years. When I walked inside, Ellery was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter in her pajamas, scrolling on her phone. She looked up, startled, like she'd forgotten I was supposed to return. "You're home early," she said, as if this were some kind of business trip. I nodded, dropped my bag by the stairs, and asked, "Do you still want to talk?" That word again. Talk. As if any of this could be undone with words. She took a breath and turned off the stove. "Yeah, I think we should." We sat across from each other at the dining table, the same one where we used to laugh over bad takeout and spill wine during game nights. It looked bigger now. Or maybe we were just smaller. She started with the line I think I knew was coming. I never meant for it to go that far. I stayed silent. Her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve. It started. I don't know. A few months ago? I was feeling. I don't know how to explain it. I almost laughed. You don't know how to explain the man in the hotel footage? You don't know how to explain kissing someone you swore was just a Labrador in a suit? But I didn't interrupt. She went on. It wasn't planned. Cyrus, he was just there. He made me feel noticed. Like I was still interesting. There it was. The sentence that cuts soft men open like scalpels. Like I wasn't enough anymore. Like stability was just another word for boring. I asked her calmly, somehow, "Why didn't you just tell me you weren't happy?" She hesitated. "Because I didn't want to hurt you." That's when I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was such a hollow, cracked answer that it deserved no better response. "You didn't want to hurt me," I repeated. "So you made me your safety net. Your fallback. Your second choice while you figured out what it felt like to be reckless." Her eyes watered. She didn't cry. "Not yet. I didn't mean to fall out of love with you. I swear to God, Ben, I didn't plan this." I believed her. That's the problem. I actually did. Because Ellery was the kind of person who didn't plan her destruction. She just followed her impulses like a bloodhound in fog and expected the world to forgive the mess she left behind. Then she said the thing I'd been both dreading and expecting. "I think we should take some time apart. Not a divorce. Just space. I need to figure out what I want." I looked at her for a long time, trying to recognize the woman I used to build dreams with. The woman who once drew maps on napkins with me at diners, dreaming about cities we'd never visit. The woman who used to cry during commercials and jump into freezing lakes on dares. But she was gone. What sat across from me now was someone unfamiliar, someone who had rehearsed this moment in her head so many times, the words came out smooth, painless, like they'd been sanded down. I finally said, "You already figured it out. The second you crossed the line with him, you decided what you wanted. The rest of this? This is just cleanup." She didn't argue. That hurt more than anything. She stood, wiped her face, and whispered, "I'll stay at Lori's for a while." I didn't stop her. Didn't ask for one last conversation, one final explanation. I just watched her gather a few things in a small bag and walk out the door, not like a wife leaving her husband, but like someone walking away from a long, outdated job. I stood there in the hallway for a while after the door closed, surrounded by the echo of a life that didn't exist anymore. And when I finally walked into the kitchen, I saw her tea mug still sitting on the counter, half full. She hadn't even finished it. That was our marriage in a nutshell, started with warmth, abandoned halfway through, left behind like it never mattered. The first night without her was quiet. Too quiet, at first. No clinking of jewelry on the nightstand. No soft shuffle of her slippers on the floorboards. No scent of her hair clinging to the pillow beside mine. Just silence. And the strange weight of absence. But then something else settled in. Peace. Not the kind that comes with resolution. I wasn't there yet. But the kind that comes with the end of pretending. The end of questions. Of half-truths and fog. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for someone to notice I was hurting. I wasn't swallowing my suspicions. I wasn't sharing a roof with a lie. She was gone. And I was still here. The days that followed were strange. I found myself doing things I hadn't done in years. Making coffee how I liked it, not how she preferred it. Rearranging the living room just because it had always bothered me. I played records I used to love before our shared playlists took over. I even started cooking again, not just for two, but for the joy of it. For the aroma. For the control of creating something real in a world that had felt fake. I deleted the folder with all the evidence. The photos. The footage. The document. Not out of denial, but because I didn't want my recovery to orbit around her betrayal. That story was over. I didn't need to keep rereading the chapters she had ruined. I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Myra. She didn't ask for details in the first session, just let me talk. And when I told her everything, she didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me like I was someone becoming new. You didn't lose your worth, she said once. You just finally stopped handing it to someone who didn't know what to do with it. That stuck with me. A few weeks later, I ran into Carson again, the friend who lent me his cabin. He invited me to a little backyard gathering at his place. I almost said no, but I went. And for the first time, I laughed. Not the kind of laugh you fake at work, not the kind you use to hide tension, a real laugh. A laugh that came from the chest. And that's where I met Marla. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't loud. She asked thoughtful questions, listened like every word mattered, and had the kind of smile that didn't need an occasion. We didn't fall into anything romantic, not right away. But there was an ease between us that I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Like I didn't have to audition for someone's attention. I could just be. Weeks turned into months. Fall arrived. The leaves outside our old house turned the same golden shade I remembered from our early days. Ellery came by once to pick up the rest of her things. She didn't cry. Neither did I. We spoke like two people closing a book we both knew had ended 50 pages ago. And when she asked, "Are you okay?" I told her the truth. "Yes," I said. "I really am." She nodded, said goodbye, and walked away, this time for good. Now it's been almost a year. My life isn't perfect. I'm not healed in the fairy tale sense. But I'm better, lighter, more honest with myself than I ever was before. I learned that being the quiet one, the patient one, the loyal one, doesn't mean being the one who gets left behind. It just means you had more to give than the wrong person could carry. And I'm proud of that now. Because I didn't crumble. I didn't become bitter. I didn't lose myself. I found him. And he's someone worth staying loyal to.